Hello everyone, I am Felix. I am a member of the Books Beyond Bars UK collective, which sends books and educational resources to LGBTQIA plus people in prison in the UK. HYPERTEXT are working with us, soliciting some book donations for us this year, and invited us to have the conversation that follows with Sarah Jane Baker, who is a artist and writer and musician, and also kind of outspoken advocate and commentator on the state of the UK prison system, drawing on her own experience of being incarcerated for 30 years. So before kind of moving on to get into that conversation, I just wanted to open by saying thank you for all of your attention this afternoon. I hope you get a lot out of the conversation, and also a big thanks to Bound and to the Open Art Gallery for sharing the platform with us today to have this conversation. So without further ado, as I said, I'm Felix, but I'm going to hand over to Sarah now. So Sarah, if you could just tell us even a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Okay, hiya Felix. It's thank you very much for this opportunity to speak to you and to speak to your wonderful people. As you know, I don't know if the other people know that I was in prison for 30 years. I was released from prison last September, and life has been a bit of a whirlwind since I was released. I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. I'm quite fortunate that I have a lovely flat with a quite expensive rent. At the moment, I still pretty much get my money from the food bank. Life is a struggle, and I must admit, 3 times I've asked to be returned to prison because life has been really difficult. But that is through times when I've been feeling quite down. 30 years in prison will take more than a year to undo. I'm sure you're already aware that I've founded this organisation called the Trans Prisoner Alliance, which was to support transgender prisoners in getting their makeup and getting clothing so they can present to the gender identity clinics in their chosen identity. Because at the moment, if a transgender prisoner wants a diagnosis or needs a diagnosis of gender dysphoria before treatment can commence, they have to present. Well, can I do them fingers? They have to present as a female or a male, whatever that means. I mean, that's a debate for another day, for another talk. I wrote 2 books when I was in prison: Life Imprisonment, An Unofficial Guide, and Transgender Behind Prison Walls. Thank you to Waterside Press. If I write books beyond bars, you supply them to prisons. Thank you very much for that. I also did a contribution to Cole Catamol's book, Prison: A Survival Guide. The chapter I did was the LGBTQI chapter. While I was in prison, I also got into, I learned to read and write in prison. And once I could read and write, there was just no stopping. I got the best education that no money could get in prison. And I also got into political embroidery. Not on the same big scale as, say, like the Turner Prize winner Grayson Perry, but all the stuff I did was the focus was on the inhumanity of the prison system as a whole. it would be too easy for me to just say, oh, I believe in abolition. As an end goal, that would be a great thing, to find alternatives to custody. But the pragmatist in me says that I think reform would be a good start. I don't know what kind of way that reform will come about, because there's no money, there's no resources, there's no mental health support in the community for the prisons, for the prison population of what, perhaps 94,500 as it currently stands. Since I was, well, while I was in prison and since my release, I exhibited at the Turner Contemporary in Margate, the South Bank Exhibition Centre, Westminster Central Hall, Lewes Town Hall. I currently have a piece on exhibition in the Brighton Museum. I also have a piece which was being used for the Queer the Peer exhibition in Brighton. And last month I exhibited at the Kensington and Chelsea Art Week, which was a great honour. It was a great privilege to be asked, because I didn't realise that I'd caught a few people's attention with what I was doing. At the moment, I'm still making art in my flat. The medium that I'm using is graffiti, and so a lot of the work that I do, or a lot of the graffiti that I do, or the art that I do, is mainly based on environmental issues, Extinction Rebellion, Stop HS2, the railway link that I'm sure you're aware of, has like decimated 116 ancient woodlands, going from like Euston Square all the way up into Birmingham, costing £1 billion a mile. No one seems to want this project, but once it was started, no one seems to have a clue how to stop it, this monster. And I'm now here at your mercy. Any questions that you have, I'm quite willing to answer for you. But I hope comprehensive preface to this interview to show you who I am and what I believe in. If you said what was the most important issue to me as an individual at the moment, it would be to put pressure on the government or the Ministry of Justice or whatever to release pregnant women from our prisons, because I'm sure you're aware that 2 of these women who've given birth, their babies have died down to neglect, for no other reason, just neglect within the prison system, where there hasn't been adequate maternity care for these women for all of these women who are extremely vulnerable within a prison system, which isn't set up to care for people. It's there to imprison, and it's there to break the human spirit. Now, I'm not damning all prison officers or prison governors. I'm not saying that the whole system is rotten to the core, but I believe that much of it is. And personally, I don't think much of it can be reformed. The only problem is there's no way the British public will get behind prison abolition. They just won't, unfortunately. That's what I believe.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, there's like loads of parts of that as an introduction that I'm like going to come back to. But to chime in on that point, is that it definitely feels like a long and hard like road in terms of getting people on board with abolition specifically, but also that it feels, because in a way I'm quite recent in getting more of an understanding, doing more reading around abolition over like the past sort of 4 or 5 years, and speaking to people and learning things, And even in that time frame, I feel like there seems to be more like a very like slowly like increasing awareness of abolition even as a concept, where maybe 4 or 5 years ago people wouldn't even have known what you were even talking about to raise it as a question, which doesn't mean most people agree with it, but I don't know, I guess it's continuing the sort of slow and steady work, isn't it, of talking about it.
Speeches from Parliament Square about trying to promote the idea of like prison abolition, I mean, as an ideal, and trying to get people comfortable with thinking about it. And the best way that I seem able to put it across is to tell human stories, the individual stories of people in the system. As I've said on many platforms, the prison system can be broken up pretty much into thirds, where you've got people in there who are mentally ill, or I think the term is neurodiverse, but mentally ill. You have some really ill, some really sick people in the prison system. There's nowhere else for them to go. So the prison system becomes a dumping ground, and prison officers are not trained to deal with people with complex mental health issues. You don't, I mean, it's not rocket science. I mean, anyone with half an ounce of empathy can see that. But then you've got people in prison with drug addiction problems. And the prison system is awash with drugs. It is, and no one wants to talk about that. No one wants to talk about corruption within the prison system. That prison officers are paid such a low wage is no excuse for the high level of corruption that exists within our jails, which puts not just prisoners' lives at risk, but also the corrupt officers, their colleagues, they're putting their colleagues' lives at risk too. But then you've also got the other third, the people who are considered to be poor copers. If you have a system which is set up and managed from above by people with the education, a degree level education, and they're making offending behaviour courses for prisoners to do, these are all, you pretty much need the education. You need at least an A-level education, a level of education, to be able to understand that. Some people struggle, they just do. Not everybody's IQ is equal to each other. We can't I've met people in prison who are not considered to be mentally ill, but I mean, they'll have an IQ of like a 7-year-old child, yet they're treated as being completely culpable for the crime they committed, which may have been just for money to survive. Not everybody can be intelligent, not everybody can be smart. The prison system is full of vulnerable people. Now, I said you've got these thirds, the poor copers, the people with mental health issues, and the people who have drug addiction problems. And if we drew a Venn diagram, many of these people touch on that centre part. Prison system is not about compassion. It's not about looking at people with empathy, and it's not about teaching people to be well-rounded, productive members of the community. The thing is, I think I'm not trying to go off on a political tangent. The capitalist system is just bad. If you have no money, if you have no access to funds, if you have no access to safe and decent housing, you are in trouble. You are. And I think I heard some guy on some radio station, he was saying that most people in Britain are just 2 paychecks away. If they miss 2 paychecks, if they miss 2 mortgage payments, they'll be on the street. This is a frightening time, not just for people outside of prison, but for people inside of jail. The only news that prisoners are going to be getting is on the phone if they're able to get out of their cells. But I've been told by reliable sources that most of the prison system is now locked down 23.5 hours a day. In some, it's 24 hours a day. And the staff, the prison officers, bring food to the prisoner's door. And many of them are getting no access to showers. They're in cells where the windows do not open, so they're getting no fresh air. Or in this cold weather, some of the windows are so rotten that they can't be closed. Some of these cells lack window panes.
Yeah, like that. Those kind of conditions. It reflects a lot of the things that people are writing to us about as well at the moment, both about lengths of lockdown and ways that people are being treated, how well information's being communicated to people, and also like heading into things getting colder, which is just the other side of the coin in the summer when things were really, really hot, and that was its own
ease in some jails.
Yeah. And obviously that's really potentially dangerous. So it's that's some of the things that people are starting to come to be like talking about and mentioning in letters and things. I guess the when you were saying about people's ability to cope, and I guess it's making me think of, and it's one of those things where it's like, in no way is this a good enough solution, but a lot of the people who write to us, especially at the moment, is for like books, but also for things like basic craft materials to do like origami or to do embroidery. For some people it's as a means to be able to feel, as though they basically as a way to not be self-harming or not to be coping in other ways that are more like harmful to themselves. And I guess
in the last prison that I was in Lewis, in the time I was there was 21 suicides. After the first 10, the others didn't even make the local news. They didn't even make the radio, right? So now, under COVID conditions, many prisons aren't even allowing books in. They're allowing absolutely nothing. No books, no visits, no nothing. And prison has always been full of self-harmers. But the amount of people who self-harm as a percentage has risen. So, exponentially over the last 20 years. It's so common that people have become desensitized to it, including prison staff and prison mental health workers and prison doctors. They see it all the time. They're not shocked by it anymore. And this COVID conditions and the way that people are being just locked in their cell, it's only going to make it worse. I can't think of any good thing to say about the prison system, except that it can be for some people an opportunity for reflection, and an opportunity to plan a future. But people need people to inspire them. People need books to inspire them. What's the saying? Is it was it escape with a book? Do you know what I mean? You know that saying, yeah?
Yeah.
So I'd read like really like the James Baldwin books. You know what I mean? I'd read like don't mean like kind of like, was it a day in the life of Ivan Denisovich, kind of Solzhenitsyn stuff, but I'd read like the philosophers and I got into Shakespeare and a bit of Tennyson, which I couldn't really stand. You know what I mean? I wasn't even, I don't even come from a working class family. My family just was so poor that, like, I don't know anybody who works in my family. You know, we were considered by the court system to be feral, you know, and nobody had any hope for me. I mean, I was just buried in the care system and in the prison system. So I mean, a victim of abuse, like many stories that you hear in jail. And I'm not saying that to elicit like any kind of sympathy, but it's just a fact, is that when you are damaged, when you're a damaged child, you will become a damaged adult, because there's nothing in place to like kind of arrest that deterioration in your mental health. I mean, I can't think of anyone that I knew in the prison system who wasn't on some kind of antidepressant.
Mm-hmm.
If the prison system worked, that they wouldn't have to just fill people up with antidepressants just to keep people stable. I mean, you can go to prison and be quite stable and considered quite, I mean, let me do this, quite normal. You could come out of prison with schizophrenia. It triggers you all the time. The fear of being attacked by other people, the loneliness, sometimes the feeling of abandonment, especially in long-term prisoners, because people forget about you. They do. I know that saying was that absence makes the heart grow fonder, but people just forget you after you've been in like 5 years, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. People forget you. And I think it's just a way of them. I think it's just a way of people like dealing with their trauma, that they're being separated from people, just to block them out. I mean, prison. There are people who go to prison and they get out and they do really well. The odds are that them people probably would have done well anyway. But for the majority, was it 80% return to prison within 2 years? I mean, on reflection, that's a really bad deal, not just for the taxpayer and for like say the British public, but also for the prisoner himself, who feel trapped in this life of this life of crime, and they can't seem to escape from it. COVID is a terrible thing. It's a terrible thing. But a disease which I think is 1,000,000 times worse is poverty. And I don't just mean poverty of no money, but poverty of ambition. I mean, and prison system, how that reinforces that negative thing in him. The prison system doesn't make you think, you know what, thank you very much for locking me up. Thank you very much for forcing me to reflect on the worst things I've ever done in my life. And thank you very much for like destroying my spirit, for breaking me. That's what the prison's about. The prison system brags about that, how they break people. I mean, how they will destroy people, how they will take a criminal and just in one breath they say prisoners are sent to jail. That the prison is the punishment itself, is the imprisonment. But then you come to some of these jails and they're dangerous. People want to hurt you. People want to take things from you. If you're trans, you're going to get spat at. You're going to get beaten up. You're going to get people do unspeakable things to you. But I think the best word to describe the prison system as a whole is corrosive. But another bad thing about this COVID is the lack of access to libraries. Because if you turn on the television, you've got your little incel TV, you're only going to get bad news, unless you're watching Ben Shepherd on Tipping Point or something. So I mean, or EastEnders, wherever your bag is. But many prisons, I mean, for years now, have had no access to a library at all. And I think books are the only books, and reading is the only way that you can get a different perspective on life, apart from your immediate circumstance. Escape. I would go to prison libraries, and I'd get like a map of the world. They wouldn't let you have an A to Z of like Britain, in case you tried to escape. But I'd sit down with a map of the world, and I would dream, and I would imagine about these faraway lands and the kind of lives that the people there led. So, I mean, learning bits of different languages, you know, I'd get these like language CDs. I mean, and history. The prison system doesn't teach the majority prisoners to a good level of education. It doesn't. You've got like level 1 and level 2 maths and English. But there's also this issue of what I would call exploitation, where a lot of prisons now have allowed private companies to get their foot in the prison system and set up companies in the prison system and get prisoners working for £25 a week, rather than that company pay someone in the community a minimum wage. The thing is, not only does that undercut a local economy, but a lot of these people in workshops, they're encouraged to go in there and work. But some of these people can't even read and write. They don't want smart people working in their workshops. They just want bodies. And that's like a terrible shame. It's a terrible indictment on the prison system that prisoners are now being seen as like material to be used for labour. I mean, to make money for private companies. And I'm not going to out any names unless you want me to, because I will. But, you know, it's like the prison system said, well, we can't do nothing else with these prisoners. We can't reform them. They can't be helped. There's nothing any good about them. The only thing we can do is use their bodies and use their labour. And in return, they'll get a pittance, £25 a week. It's terrible. And like I say, not only does it undercut a local economy, but when the public find out these stories and they say, yeah, prisoners are doing a job for £25, and they're going, hold on a minute, why have prisoners got jobs when there's so much unemployment outside? The fact is, a lot of these prisoners, they're kind of coerced, or they're forced into these workshops. They're told, like, if you don't work, you won't get your parole, you won't get. And if you're a good worker, you're still not going to get a recommendation for a parole, because they want you to continue to work. And that is a side of the prison system that doesn't seem to have much of a spotlight upon it. In the United States, a lot of prisoners are forming unions. So I mean, they're forming unions. They say, look, we're workers, so hold on, where's our union rights? The thing is, that kind of action, that kind of solidarity between prisoners is discouraged in the prison system. So, I mean, individualism is not a character that is it's not a character encouraged. Now, I'm not saying that all prisons are the same, but many are. Unfortunately. Sorry if I've gone on a bit.
No, it's all like, it's a big like set of things to talk about, so it makes sense to spend like a long time talking about it.
The system is a multi-billion-pound business.
Yeah, precisely.
So I mean, and a lot of people make money from prison. I mean, the prison system, the justice system it's not just about prisoners committing crimes and creating victims. But the fact is, the prison system is not set up to prevent prisoners from creating victims in the future. And it's not just about a lack of investment. It's about the system as a whole. I believe, as a rational thinking human being, either the Ministry of Justice or the politicians, I don't think they care about the public. They don't. If they did, they would set up also more humane alternatives to the prison system that actually work, not just for the offender, but also some kind of restorative justice for victims, and also to prevent victims in the future. Until such times as there's a lot of investment go into, and your idea of abolition, do you know what I mean, kind of taking hold. I don't hold much. My heart goes out to prisoners and any future victims that they create once they're released. I'm sorry, it's such like a doomsayer, but I don't have much good to say about it.
But I mean, again, I think like I think that's understandable, and it's like fair enough to still look at a situation as a whole and say, okay, maybe there's like some slow movement happening in like what could be a better direction, but at the same time, it's like totally fair to feel sort of frustrated and sad about A, being slow, and B, like you're saying, all of the things that are happening in the meantime still happening, and how hard you have to fight and struggle for even those like small something like that's it's not a reality that necessarily is like something to feel like happy and hopeful about. I think that's fair enough. I wanted to ask about, because I guess in my like understanding of the various different things that you do, and like the things that like inform your art and your writing, but also like your music, because then you're a very accomplished musician as well as everything else in various different instruments. And from what you were saying before, I guess I was wondering that it seems as though like pouring energy into the reading and the writing and the creating, it's like about survival, but also, I don't know, I guess on an individual level, a way of resisting that kind of crushing impact that you were talking about before, and the ways in which trying to survive within this system that's trying to, to kind of break you down, like you were saying.
All I can say is this, right? I'm not blowing my own trumpet. I was always clever, but I was never smart, and the two things are completely different. So I mean, I had this ability to learn. I mean, I'm getting older now. I mean, I went into the prison system, I was a teenager. I'm now 51 years of age. But if people show me stuff, I had this ability to learn. But the prison system doesn't like people who are clever, because people who are clever generally, and the more education you get, you tend to challenge the prison system, and that is a no-no. They don't want educated people in prison. They don't want people who's going to take them to the European Court when they don't do their job properly, or they breach people's human rights. See, if I was smart, I would have just kept my mouth shut, got out and wrote some books about it, and got as many platforms as I could to talk about things that I'm really passionate and things that I care about. Like I say, the prison system doesn't want clever people. It doesn't want smart people in there. It wants people who are submissive, and it wants people who can be metaphorically snapped in half and controlled. But I mean, I'm one of a few people who I was able to, as bad as the system was, I was able to try and make it work for me, and try and create opportunities. And I had a great imagination. I mean, I was also diagnosed as having a personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, and one of the symptoms of that is a need for stimulation. So I would learn many different things. I wouldn't just like, I mean, I was fortunate that I had friends who could make sure that I had my violin, that I had my guitar. So I was in many prison bands up until perhaps 15 years ago, when they were kind of scrapped. But most prisons had a band. Most prisons had art classes that you could go to, and that could be anything from like soft toys to teaching people how to paint portraits. But a lot of them things have gone now, and then a lot of them things don't exist anymore, especially under COVID conditions. I mean, one of my closest friends works in a prison as an art teacher, but she's not allowed any access to like the prisoners at all to teach them anything. But she can go to their door and put paper and pencils under the gap underneath the door. That's about it. Like I say, most prisoners, from my experience, unfortunately, are neither smart nor clever. If they were, they wouldn't have been in prison. Me, I was clever, but I was just never smart. And I mean, I'm not a perfect human being. I'm just like all of us. I guess I'm just a work in progress. And fortunately, I've had people behind me to like encourage me. If you've got no family around you, if you've got no one around you who cares, you're not really going anywhere. You need someone around you to just give you a little pat on the back and say, you know what, you're doing well. It's want to give you a bit of encouragement. For many people, especially those like myself who come from the care system, there was no one around to do that. I had to kind of do it myself.
So when you were at the beginning, you were talking about like being exhibited and showing pieces of artwork in various different places. So there's kind of two things about that. So the first one is that I'm interested about like what specifically the pieces are that have been like being shown different places, and two, what it's like then to receive like that kind of recognition. Then especially you're coming from a place of like that kind of like recognition of work and and like value if it's been very like absent in the past, then what it's like to receive those kinds of recognition in the present, I guess.
Well, for many prisoners, their way of showing off their art, or their first way of like presenting their art to the world, as you know, through the Consular Art Scheme. Unfortunately, I've got a problem with those now, because on the Consular, like the selection panels, you've also got people from these private prison companies So whereas prisoners like myself, a lot of my art reflected my experience of the prison system and my views on it, and about some of the negative aspects of the prison system. When you've got actual like companies, like, you know, these companies who own prisons, who run private prisons, when they're selecting art, they're not going to be selecting my art anymore. So I mean, they're not critical of them.
Yeah, they're probably going to want stuff that's kind of, I don't know, like quote unquote sort of inspirational. Or, yeah. I get what you're saying.
You know what? The thing is, being critical, I think, is healthy. Whether someone's being critical of the government or the prison system or any other like government institution, whether you're protesting from Parliament Square or Speaker's Corner, or if you're doing it in poetry from your prison cell, or your your art reflects the dire circumstances of the majority of prisoners, I think that's really healthy. And to suppress that, I think, is probably it's really bad. So, I mean, people need to have an outlet for the stuff that they have in their mind, as long as it's as long as it's not offensive to like individuals, as long as it's not bigoted or racist or homophobic or transphobic or whatever. You know, people need an outlet for that crazy stuff, and prison makes you crazy, and you need to have something. You need to have the right to share that with the world. Prison is in a bad state. All I can do is say, like, try and put pressure on the governors to open the libraries and give prisoners access to books. So, I mean, books pretty much was what turned my life around.
Yeah, and I feel like there's something really important in there about like to allow people the full range, not just allow, but like support people in the full range of expressing the full range of their experiences without censoring it, based on the kinds of things that you're talking about like wanting to show a particular kind of narrative or story about prisons and about the prison system. So people being people in whatever way they can actively supporting like the whole spectrum of like ways that the experiences that people have, and people expressing the experiences that they have, and not shutting down bits that they might be like uncomfortable with or less familiar with.
Well, especially I think not just like the high level of like toxic masculinity within male prisons, where a prisoner who wants to get a really good education is seen as somehow to be effeminate and then can become a target. But also, like, one thing that I only recently discovered was like the existence of white privilege within our prison system, where if you're from like a black or ethnic minority within the prison system, you will encounter racism, not just from prisoners, but you also get that from staff, in the way that staff don't really want to interact with people, especially for migrant families, for example. I mean, and a lot of prison officers that I know, they don't join the prison system because they're nice. So I mean, they don't join the prison system because they got a great level of education. Some of the most of the prison officers that I know are just a reflection of the rest of society, are damaged in some way or have some kind of trauma. And when prison officers bring that trauma to work with them, or that mindset, they turn it on the most vulnerable members within the prison system.
So you mentioned at the beginning about the Trans Prisoner Alliance, and I guess I wanted to hear more about, because I know about Trans Prisoner Alliance a little bit already, but for people who don't, what your like vision is for it and where you would hope for it to sort of go. What your sort of
at the moment, it's really difficult to access funds. At one time, I would buy makeup and clothing for prisoners, for trans prisoners, and but then a lot of the prisons changed the rules, so you couldn't send makeup or clothing anymore. All you could do was send money. And at the moment, especially in COVID conditions, people are holding their money really tight. I mean, I'm sure they maybe they're worried about the economy could just take a nosedive. I think that's people are worried about that. They're holding on to all the money and the assets they currently have, and they're protecting that. But I do work with another organisation called the Prisoner Solidarity Network. So whatever I'm unable to do, the Prisoner Solidarity Network, or there's a Committee Against Prison Expansion, CAPE, where they're based in Bristol. But these organisations, I mean, the Trans Prisoner Alliance, it's pretty much me trying to get money to help individuals, and I have neither the skills on the internet or the ability to raise large amounts of money. But the Prisoner Solidarity Network and CAPE, CAPE, they have these skills. So a lot of the prisoners that I'm unable to help, I pass them on to the Prisoner Solidarity Network, and they are helping them. I mean, absolutely fantastic. These organisations, they're just amazing. They take my breath away with their level of kindness, and their ability to see. Sorry, someone else tried to call me. And their ability to see the good in people.
Yeah, so it's at a stage of, it's like building connections.
Yeah.
To do the work through. That's like where it is at the moment.
Well, I was hoping that in the future that I could get charitable status and link up with an organisation like the Criminal Justice Arts Alliance, or hopefully get some art council or heritage money or lottery funding. But the thing is, I don't have the skills for that. I mean, the internet came out while I was in prison. So I mean, apart from, I mean, if you didn't send me this link, I wouldn't have been able to speak to you. So, I mean, I'm not. It's not because I'm stupid, but I have a bit of a phobia about the internet, you know. But I'm getting there.
I guess that's like what you were saying, though, isn't it? Of you find the people who can like contribute those skills and then build it up together. I hope that's the way that it goes. I would love to see that happen.
I'm quite optimistic.
Sorry?
I'm quite optimistic. I mean,
yeah, I'm gonna keep an eye, and it's very I guess because we send out so many. I mean, as soon as like transgender behind prison walls in particular, as soon as it arrives, it goes straight. It'll get sent straight out again on the same day. So we never have them in stock because they leave as soon as they arrive. So because that's such like a valuable resource for so many people, and for us to be able to send, it's just very exciting, you know, from the perspective of Books Beyond Bars, to think about where things can go, and where like your work might travel. But I guess that brings me to the last thing, or set of things that I want to ask you about, which is about the writing and your books, and how you made that happen, I suppose, because they were both published while you were still in prison, I think. Yeah. So how did you make that happen for yourself?
Well, what I did was I thought the thing was, I already had the idea for the books. I'd pretty much written the books before I even had a publisher. But what I did is I went into the libraries in many jails that I was in, about 5 different jails. I had the books. I could bring it up to date. But I'd go into the library and I'd find books which I thought was like similar, but maybe like instead of about how to surprise the prison system, it might be or information about being transgender. It would be like advice books about prison, for example. And I was quite fortunate that the first publisher that I wrote to, Brian Gibson at Waterside Press, he just ran with it. And I was quite lucky. The thing is, I tell prisoners just to write all the time. Write about stuff that you know. And I'm not ashamed to say that one thing that I know a lot about is prison. I'm not going to say unfortunately. I'm not going to say that. I was able to make prison work for me, but like I say, I'm a rarity, and my books were good. Why wouldn't I get publishers to take them on board? They served a purpose. They gave information to prisoners that they would never get anywhere else. You ask a prison officer, right? You ask 10 prison officers, right, the same question, you'll get 50 answers. You know? You read my book, you'll get one answer, and it'll be the right answer. I mean,
yeah.
But also, if you're coming out as transgender and you don't have any like experience of female clothing, so, you could go to, as you know yourself, you could go to like 6 shops and buy 6 pairs of shoes, right? A pair of shoes in 6 different shops, and they're all the same size, but only one pair will fit you.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Now, if you're trying to access female clothing within the prison system, you're always like buying stuff, nothing to return it, buy it and return it, and by the time it's got to you and you've returned it, it's out. They won't take it back. Do you know what I mean? So, but as you know, it's a lot of practical advice. So a lot of practical advice for people, and a lot of people contact me from prison, especially where they got phones in their cell. So I could be in bed at like 11:30 at night, and then I'll get like some prisoner from like Swell side on the Isle of Sheppey will phone me up. Do you know what I mean? And it's a great privilege to be able to to share with some of these people like my experiences of the system and how they can make the system work for them in some way.
Yeah, it's an incredible resource, and that's from even a perspective. It's not speaking directly to me, but so the impact I know that it has for people who we send it to is just massive. So the ending question was just like, what kind of like stories and art and people making things, what do you want to see more of?
Graffiti. Political graffiti, not just people doing pretty coloured stuff. graffiti now, they don't necessarily have to make it. They don't necessarily have to like paint it on walls, but they can. But I wouldn't recommend it unless it's like, say, on a legal wall, like say Graffiti Tunnel, Leek Street, perhaps in Waterloo, where I'm down there quite a lot. You know, stencils, like I think political art is gonna be a big thing. I think it's gonna be the next big thing. Do you mean political art? I mean, I collect posters and I collect these stickers that they got on the floor telling people to keep their distance and stuff like that. I keep all that stuff because one day COVID will be just a distant memory. But there's been so many of these banners and protest stuff, and I'm not just me. The Bishopsgate Institute in London, they're collecting lots of like protest stencils and banners, especially like especially recently. There's been lots of banners and artwork created from, like, say, the Black Lives Matter movement, the Sister Space movement up in London, Cradle Community, but also. I mean, not just like trans pride, but LGBTQI community. I mean, they're creating some a lot of great art has been created during lockdown, and prisoners can do that in a cell with a pencil, which they can buy off the canny. They can buy pencils and they can buy paper and rulers, and I say to them, just draw whatever in your head. So I mean, if you've got something to say, draw it. I mean, and if you can draw it like in a script or make a stencil out of it, I don't know. I just do whatever comes into my head. But I think political art is going to be a big thing in Britain. I think it's going to be the next big thing, because a lot of it has been created under these lockdown conditions. And as soon as this lockdown's over, and so hopefully once COVID's over for good, a lot of people are going to be finding studio space to show this stuff off. I've been showing it off to Kensington Chelsea Art Week. I caught their attention. I went in there and I just graffitied their gallery, and I encouraged members of the public to do it as well. And first of all, they were horrified, and I said, "Look, you called me. I didn't call you."
Yeah, this is what you paid for. Yeah,
it doesn't matter. I mean, I'm not being a braggart. I'm the hardest working graffiti artist in London. And that's not by accident. It's not by accident that I got in the Turner Contemporary or Brighton Museum. It's because I work really hard. And when I get an idea, I get it down. I get it done. And I use anything, stuff that I find in skips, stuff that I find on the road, stickers that I might pull off a lamppost. Yeah, or something. I mean, the street is the gift that keeps on giving. I mean, I get a lot of my stuff from the streets. A lot of my a lot of the pieces that I use within my own work. I mean, hopefully, I'm open to get the Turner Prize in 5 years. 5 years, come on, Turner. That's what I'm hoping for. But you know, not just myself, but for protest art. It's not just about me. It's about the organisations that I represent and issues that I care about. Try and get that all in my art. Yeah, and share platforms with other people.